I was sitting in the back seat of an Uber when the driver looked at me through the mirror and said, "You shouldn't be going home tonight, Elena. They already know you're coming." I froze. I had never seen this man before in my life. Before I tell you what happened next, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon, because what started as a random car ride turned into a twisted revenge story that changed everything I believed about trust, loyalty, and safety. My name's Elena Brooks, and a few months ago, my life looked perfectly normal. I worked as a financial analyst for a growing tech company, had a small apartment in the city, and my routine was as predictable as clockwork. Same morning coffee shop, same 8:30 train, same Uber rides home when work went late. Nothing ever felt unusual until that night. It was around 10 p.m. when I booked a ride home from the office. The driver, a middle-aged man named Samir, greeted me politely. He didn't talk much, just soft radio music and the hum of the road. But halfway through the drive, he glanced at me through the mirror and said, "Rough day again, huh? You've been working late all week." I frowned. "How do you know that?" I asked. He smiled weakly and said, "You take this route every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, always after 10. I hadn't realized my rides had become that predictable. But something in his tone didn't sound casual. It sounded like a warning. When we stopped at a red light, he turned slightly, his voice low. "Listen, I shouldn't be telling you this, but someone's been asking about you." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" I asked. He hesitated, then said, "Two different men stopped me outside your office last week. They showed me your picture and asked what time you usually go home. They offered money." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I laughed nervously, thinking it had to be a mistake, but his face was serious, genuinely scared. He continued, "I didn't tell them anything, but they seemed familiar, like they knew your name before they even spoke." The rest of the ride felt like an eternity. When we reached my apartment, Samir didn't drop me off in front of the building. He stopped across the street and said, "Just promise me one thing. Don't go inside tonight. Go somewhere safe." I didn't listen. I told myself he was overreacting. But the moment I stepped out and looked toward my apartment window, I saw a light flicker inside. I lived alone, and I knew I hadn't left any lights on. I called a friend from my office, Lydia, and asked if I could stay at her place. She agreed immediately, surprised but supportive. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed everything. His words, the light in my apartment, the men asking about me. The next morning, I went to check my place with building security. Nothing looked out of place, except one thing. My living room table had been moved slightly, just enough for someone to hide something under it. When I crouched down, I found a small black device stuck underneath, a tracker. My blood ran cold. I went straight to the police, but all they could do was take a report. Without proof of who planted it, they couldn't do much. So I started my own investigation. I checked my Uber history, and that's when I noticed something strange. My previous 3 rides had the same driver name listed, but when I tapped on it, the profile photo had changed. Someone had cloned a driver's account, which meant whoever was tracking me wasn't random. They had access to my movements. I told Lydia about it, and she offered to help. Together, we dug deeper. Using a friend in tech security, we traced the tracker's serial number. It was registered to my company. That's when everything started to make sense, and also stopped making any sense at all. Why would my workplace track me? I decided to confront my boss, Mr. Collins. He was always charming, polite, maybe too interested in my personal life. When I asked about company devices being used to track employees, he smiled and said, "Elena, you're misunderstanding. It's just for company cars." Except I didn't have one. Later that night, I received a text from an unknown number. "Stop asking questions, Elena. You're safer when you don't know." That was the final confirmation. I wasn't imagining it. I reached out to Samir again. He agreed to meet me in a public cafe. When he arrived, he looked even more worried. "He was right," he said. "One of the men who approached me, he works for your company. I recognized him from the building." He handed me a small flash drive. "You left this in my car last week." I didn't remember doing that, but when I opened it later, I found something that made my hands shake. Video files. Footage of me at work, in the elevator, walking to the station. Each clip labeled with timestamps. Someone had been monitoring me for months. It turned out my company was running a secret project that involved employee data collection, except mine had gone far beyond normal limits. I was one of the few employees who accidentally found out about financial discrepancies in our department. I'd mentioned it to my boss once, jokingly. That was enough for him to mark me as a liability. They were tracking me to make sure I didn't leak anything. But if they wanted silence, I was going to give them the opposite. Lydia and I worked nights, gathering every trace of evidence: emails, transfers, messages. Samir risked his job to provide time-stamped ride logs proving company staff had contacted him. We built a case strong enough to make headlines. A month later, a journalist published the entire story. The company's illegal monitoring practices went public. Executives resigned, investigations opened, and my former boss lost everything. I didn't just get revenge through anger, I got it through exposure. And the best part? Samir got his reward too. The news agency credited him for coming forward first. Now I live in a new city under a new name. Sometimes I still check over my shoulder when I get into a car. Old habits die hard. But I've learned something powerful. Sometimes the people warning you are the only ones who actually care. And sometimes the ones you think are protecting you are the ones holding the knife behind their back. So, if a stranger ever tells you to not trust familiar faces, listen. Because I didn't, and it nearly cost me everything.